Welcome back to our forum. Please be reminded that we have Spanish and French translation. The language here will remain English. If you have questions or comments, please use our question function as before. My co-moderator Diana will be happy to feed them into our session here. My name is Thomas and I'm your moderator. In our previous sessions, we have looked at the topic of today from a very general perspective. First, what is and what could be the importance for contracts for climate change and just transition. Building on that, we took a deep dive into the specialities of negotiating contracts for critical minerals, just in the session before with Nicola and Lou, both concerning the needs of resources-rich countries and the very practical questions on what is needed in the negotiation itself. Now, we will look at the issue of challenges countries face when trying to reach good contracts. We will look to the partner countries. Private companies have experts constantly negotiating mineral resources and their exploration. Governments often do not have the capacity to negotiate with these experts on equal footing. And so we will discuss these challenges on our next very diverse and experienced panel. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm delighted and to welcome our next speakers for this topic. There's first Rebecca Major. She is partner energy mining and infrastructure at the Herbert Freehills from France. And I don't want to actually take too much time to say everything about what these experts know. I just briefly give you a name and then we go directly into the discussion. Then we have Kees Hörchner. He is the owner and also investor consultant of the Rebel Group based in the Netherlands. We have Santiago Dondo with us, the former Undersecretary Minister of Energy and Mining in Argentina. Welcome. We have Nneoma Nwogu, Senior Counsel International Development and Sustainable Mining from the World Bank here. And we have, last but not least, also somebody from Berlin, Yannic Kiewitt. He is Senior Policy Officer for Energy, Hydrogen, Raw Materials at our Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, or as we say in German shortly, BMZ. Welcome to this panel. And as I said, I could speak for hours about your expertise and what you're all doing, but Rebecca, because I really want to use the time so that you can have the floor, all of you. Rebecca, we start off with you, with all your experiences. And I know for myself, I do have my prejudices. For example, that that companies only just want to have the best in their interests and they actually have no interest that governments are on equal footprint. Is that also your experience, or why would it be in the best interest also for companies that private investors would work with a government that is competent? Rebecca.
Thank you very much. Yes, I mean, most of the work that I do is for private investors rather than for governments, although sometimes I do work for governments. Actually, although you would think that having a badly advised government or a government that's not advised would be good for the private company, it's actually better for the private company to have a sensible team of advisors and a group of government officials opposite, because I think increasingly private companies realise that having a good, sensible, pragmatic contract is better than having a contract that's too good. If it's too good, or, it's generally maybe not going to last, and that is the big problem. It needs to be something that's going to last, that can live its life over the 20 years that it needs to live, and it needs to be a nice, careful, balanced contract. If we end up having to renegotiate it every couple of years because it's too good and it's not giving the flexibility that the government needs, then that is bad for everybody, because it slows down the project. It gives a bad relationship with the government. It gives a bad reputation to the investor, because often there's quite a lot of bad feeling around that renegotiation. It's much better to have an open, straight partnership between the private company and the state from the beginning, and have a kind of give and take relationship with them. I think it's a little bit like a good marriage. You have a bit of give and take. People need to have some compromises. It doesn't need to be too good for one party and not good for the other. So that's all I've got to say for this, to start off with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for saying, okay, if actually those contracts should work, we also have to speak about the relationship of all the partners, because when they sign a contract, they kind of engage in a very long-lasting relationship with each other, and whether that actually will work or not work depends on how poorly negotiated the contract is. So from the very beginning, you need to create a room in which everybody can come to the table and share their thoughts and ideas. Nevertheless, maybe later we can talk about the difference between a marriage and then an economic contract. I hope there is some. But I agree that for a long partnership, it might be even more than give and take. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Kees from the Netherlands. You have your private company. You're not only consulting, because you're saying, okay, if we really believe in what we're saying, we also invest in this. So you're also an actor. But how is your connection to capacity building? Is that something that you see, or what else is needed than just capacity building? Thank you.
Yes, I can say something on that, Thomas.
Yeah.
So I'm not a mining expert. I have a different background. I come from the infrastructure angle, and often we're hired actually to think about how to organize things. So we look at the conceptual side, for example, on how to share infrastructure. And my experience with that is that you can only get so far. So I think the interesting thing, what Connex does, is that it goes from what I say, the thinking about how you would do things, to the doing. And it's the implementation side during negotiations that is the interesting part of my work, because you can only think of so much before, and then you enter a negotiation process where you run into existing positions. And I think some of the problems we run into is that you can come up with an idea, but to implement this something wholly different. And you need stamina, and you need conviction actually to enter that negotiation and to fulfill it. So I think that's my experience in working with Connex, that we are given the room actually to jointly, public and private, to find a solution. So it's not that you beforehand can think of the solution just as a simple concept. You have to find out what the other parties actually want, what the private mining companies often want in that sense. And I can give the example of where we're advising in Liberia, where it's the issue of a multi-user railway and port corridor, where if you would hire us to tell you how you could look at it as a multi-user corridor, we could come up with a concept. But if you start negotiating, then you see that parties have different interests. They already have different contractual positions often. So there are existing rights. And the real challenge is to figure out together how you could deal with those rights and those requirements during a negotiation. And I think that's what we bring in, is in not only thinking about how you could do this in theory, but in practice, you have to find a solution with these parties in what works for everybody at the table. And I agree with Rebecca. At the end of the day, everybody has to give in something. That's the let's say the objective of negotiation is to find a solution that works for everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Kees. The way you described Connex and the rooms it actually opens for negotiation for me as a mediator sounds like actually Connex is mediating the process, giving everybody the opportunity to speak about what is important for yourself, but also to listen to the others, what is important for them, and then cooperatively trying to solve the problem so that everybody gets what is important for him or her. Thank you very much. It makes it more feasible for me to understand what Connex is actually doing beside expertise, but also creating a process for negotiating. Our next speaker is Nneoma from the World Bank. And Nneoma, you have many experience in capacity building. From your perspective, what are the major challenges and obstacles for capacity building in the emerging economies? How could you actually transfer the knowledge and experience that is in one person to another person? How do you actually do this? How do you experience this? Nneoma.
Again, it's really a great opportunity and a privilege to be here. It's, when we think about capacity gaps and, looking at it from the mining sector writ large, there are a number of areas, especially in the development context, where there are capacity gaps. Most of the time, we speak about the infrastructure capacity in terms of those gaps, whether we're talking about transportation, rail, port, road, whether we're talking about energy infrastructure, because we know that the mineral sector is heavily energy intensive. We talk about the services gap. So whether we're talking about suppliers to the sector, so having the local companies that would have the capacity to supply to the sector. We talk about the skills gap. So when we're thinking about local employment, that's also another kind of gap in terms of capacity in the development sector. We talk about the finance gap in terms of investments, into the sector, especially with MSMEs in terms of, small and sort of medium scale sort of companies with operating in the sector. So there are a number of gaps that you can think about. Regulatory gaps, institutional governance gaps that exist. So there's quite a lot. And the interesting thing about this is that in many ways you can't solve one without the other. They are all quite interrelated if you start to get into the specifics. But I kind of want to focus in this moment on skills gap, and actually specifically as we're talking about, a lot of negotiations and contract making. I want to look at legal skills gap because, in terms of negotiations, we're also talking about local legal capacity. And it's something that is not discussed a lot. There's usually the notion of, okay, if a government is interested in negotiating mineral contracts, hiring global mining law firms or lawyers to negotiate these deals are critical. And sometimes organizations like the World Bank, the African Legal Support Facility, support governments in facilitating these kinds of, in a sense, meeting these needs, or at least filling the gap in the short term. So the topic that we're discussing is, looking at short-term sort of measures as well as, medium to long-term measures. So the question is, are there also long-term measures that are worth thinking about? And there are many ways of doing this. Some of the things that the bank does, the World Bank and a number of other development institutions, is to facilitate these enabling environments, building out these capacities, providing for training, capacity building, utilizing the education sector, finding centers of excellence, across, using the Africa region, for example, across the Africa region. And in the last session, one of the speakers spoke about the Africa Mining Legislation Atlas, which is a program that seeks to do that, to build out local legal capacity for the medium to long term. And, we can continue to speak a little bit more about that. And we facilitate this utilizing a number of global institutions, organizations that come together to provide this training. So in terms of the question that you asked about transfer of skills, even including mining companies who also show up to identify their needs, but also educate on their business, right? So that people are just much more sensitized and able to be responsive in their skills building for the sector. So these are ways in which you can build our capacity, but I'm happy to speak about that a little more broadly as we get into the session.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think we also should not look at the developing countries as, oh, they all have these deficits in skills and knowledge and so on. I think if you go out in Washington, you would find a lot of people who lack the skills that you're just describing. So that's also a phenomenon in the developed countries also. But going to Argentina, Santiago, from your perspective, coming again from the government's perspective, what is it actually? What is needed to empower the governments so that they can do better negotiation and better deals? And maybe more specific, I mean, how could an initiative like Connex actually support governments? And then after that, we go back to Berlin. But first we go to Argentina. Santiago.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you all for this opportunity. Yes, my experience in Argentina as when I was in government, actually it was a pity that Connex was not acting in Latin America at that time, because I found quite unique in the ecosystem of the international cooperation. Many times from the perspective of the government, you have two different things with the international cooperation that I think Connex tackles very well. One is sometimes it's very macro level, and it's true that it's important, but sometimes it's very long term. And the second is that many times when you are in office, you really need something that is burning you. Is a really current concern, and the projects of sometimes the project of international cooperation are so bureaucratic and so long that you can end up with another administration when the project is done, and it's very difficult to really get the benefit out of the outcome. So I think that what attracted me to Connex is the idea of getting very quickly into supporting the officials with a specific issue that is really in the desk at that time, and it's always a priority because it's demand driven. So that is not only good, I mean, for the cooperation, but also you will find always a good amount of buy-in or ownership from government, because so the agenda of the cooperation is absolutely aligned with what you need at that time. And maybe going into the why is also important. I would like to highlight some a characteristic of Connex that's also maybe not obvious, but it's not only about the technical capacity. It's not only about filling the gap of a resource is also about authority, because I agree with Rebecca that we would all of us love a situation where the private companies aligned with trying to get out of a deal the best and most fair and sustainable situation, but and a marriage, but in my experience, is not always the case, and many times the companies are underestimating the governments in a region, in Argentina, in the provinces, and also in other countries where I worked. So it's very important not only for the technical side, but also to have someone with authority bringing the good practices and experiences in other countries to confront the company and avoid that asymmetry that's also in the table, and it's not only technical. So on how or how to get that support, or how is the best way, I think is another good thing is to work very closely with government. Very closely means to become part of the team. And I saw that in different projects, and I think is absolutely great for governments to have some experts that are not in their desks thousands of kilometers away, working on a report that will send you at the end of the project, but right on the phone, right on the WhatsApp, right on the day-to-day to discuss with you and think with you and supporting you in a daily basis through the process. I think that is absolutely an advantage and something to highlight. And to finish the few things that I want to highlight in the first, I would take in the what question. I mean, what to support, or what are the topics. There's a very nice case that is the Panama project that Connex supported last year. In that case, the contract that was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court was an absolute scandal from my perspective. And the Panama is a country without any experience in mining. They had no mining experts in the government at all, and they really benefited from the tax expert that Connex brought to the table, and they end up with a deal of 10 times the government take for that project. That is a project of at least 40 years, and it's a giant one in a very small country. So that is absolutely great story to tell. But then the challenge is if the country will really use that amount of money for development, and that's why the contract needs to go at least into the specific use or assignments for the money. If I have one more minute, I would like to go back into the Lou World's comments a few minutes ago about the diplomatic pressure. I think the countries, Argentina or other countries with lithium in the region, or with copper or whatever, I mean, we are in the middle of a big geopolitical rift or situation where maybe I think we need more help from experts in geopolitics and where to stand, because it's very difficult to navigate the different pressures that are coming from different countries or regions or coalitions, and it's difficult to stand and really understand what should be your position, not depending on those pressures or trying to interpreting those pressures well. So that's my first comments, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also referring again to the Panama case, but also looking forward, saying, okay, the crisis that they were facing now will actually demand more expertise and bringing more different perspectives to the table, I also like very much the idea of saying, okay, if we have mixed teams with different professions working really together all the time and not just reading reports and sending them back and forth, that also could make a difference. Our last speaker is Yannic from Berlin, from the BMZ, Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. And sitting here in Berlin, I mean, after 30 years of the so-called reunification, we had massive infrastructure programs and projects going on. Yannic, if we could, I mean, not far from your ministry is the Potsdamer Platz. It was a no man's land just 30 years ago. Now it's a hub. But we also could talk about the Ruhrgebiet area, which actually was transformed from a coal and steel industry to a service and almost green industry of today. We could talk about a big failure, the Berlin airport that actually took 30 years and actually created lots of damages because it was not there. So I think Germans also have a lot of learnings from transition. Having said this, so what can Germany contribute if we take now the perspective of the global north again? Yannic, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. I'll have to disappoint you. I'm actually currently based in Bonn, so not close to Berlin, but I come from the Ruhrgebiet myself, so I'm very familiar with those topics and developments. But perhaps, if I may just give some thoughts or remarks from the BMZ perspective, more generally speaking about capacity development and what Connex does. In this panel. So I think maybe to zoom out a little bit, or also from our understanding, the BMZ, Connex is quite unique as a project in development cooperation. As we've heard throughout these 2 days, it focuses on contract negotiation support, and that for very good reasons. From a development point of view, we've heard several examples of how contracts can support our partner countries in reaping the benefits, economic benefits of resource exploitation, especially when we look now at the global energy transition, how contracts can anchor strong ESG standards in mining that help set up responsible supply chains. And also we've talked about infrastructure and how projects through contracts, well-negotiated contracts, can be made more resource efficient and climate friendly from the get-go. So with that focus comes also, let's say, the implications of what contract negotiations are like, and they differ quite a bit to other areas of development cooperation that we usually focus on. They are much more fast-paced, and we've heard it now several times. Yesterday, the colleague from Rwanda said they are trying to work at the speed of business, of the private sector. And Santiago just mentioned that it's for the public sector to catch up is sometimes a bit difficult, and so this is something that Connex tries to do, coming, however, from a development point of view. And so for us in designing the project or designing Connex, it was quite apparent that we had to choose an approach that was a bit different, much more demand-driven, and that really helps to provide very short-term and also tailored advice to our partner governments. So in a way, I guess you could perhaps sometimes call it more of a service provider rather than a development project in the traditional sense. And it helps to fill those capacity gaps in the short term, what we've said, but also I believe that there is some capacity that is being transferred, or some skills and knowledges in the process. And we've heard evidence again yesterday from some of our partner countries that we have supported, that it's very much this process of transferring or learning on the job, learning on the go, and these skills that are transferred, that experts bring with them, they include the more technical aspects, but also, again, Santiago mentioned this just now, the soft skills of negotiations, how to strategize, be a private company, how to coordinate negotiation positions among different ministries, how to better stakeholder engagement, and various other things. So there is this element of capacity transfer, if you will, and also from my personal perspective, if you look at it in a more abstract sense, perhaps Connex also can really set precedents or maybe create blueprints in some areas where they work. So if you take, for example, a clause on an environmental issue that is being negotiated with the help of Connex, this may be relevant for specific negotiation, but then also for further negotiation in the future of similar contracts, or might even serve as a blueprint for legislation. So in a way, you know, Connex then leaves something behind that is tangible for governments. And then again, taking it to a more abstract level, you mentioned it before, also as a German ministry, I think we are currently going, or we have gone in certain regions of the country through very similar processes. When we talk about the just transition, exiting coal mining is an ongoing process in certain parts of Germany. It has affected regions over the past decades, and even though you know, conditions might or definitely vary from country to country and region to region, there are some, I believe, general lessons that can be taken away and can be also shared with our partner governments, and especially when it comes to the very technical aspects of mine closure, you know, renaturation of mine sites and these aspects. So I think, you know, in a way, going from very small and, you know, details of the negotiations to the maybe more abstract level, there is certainly an element of capacity building in the way Connex works. And with that, I'll just for now hand it over to you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Yannic, also for just also elaborating a little bit on the Connex philosophy. That actually also what I heard is that for the ministry, it was really a new approach, not saying, oh, classically we send some experts here, but we're actually creating a process, and in this process, the experts are coming together, and that obviously this new concept seems to be really to work from the examples we hear, that actually with only a few dollars or euros, you can have a huge impact in the reality. But thanks for sharing this with us. I know that we have some questions from the audience again, so I would like to call for Diara to join us and to share your questions. Diara.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. I'd like to bring in a first question from our audience for Nneoma, but maybe also for our other panelists. So does it really make sense for a country, developed or not, to try to develop all the needed skills in-house? After all, private companies bring in outside lawyers or consultants for matters that are specialized and don't recur frequently. Very relevant question in my view.
Super, yeah. Nneoma, you first, and maybe Rebecca also. It looks like she also felt provoked for this question. And okay, we start with Nneoma.
So does it make sense? It's a really good question. I mean, first, the mining sector is a very sort of long-term sector. You know, we've heard the discussions about these are investment commitments that span, 20 to 40 years. And so that notion of helicoptering and expertise, that may work at the initial point of negotiations, but we also realize that good contract making requires enforcement, it requires monitoring. And so over the course of that investment, you're going to have to review the contract. You're going to ensure compliance with the provisions agreed to. And so having the skill set locally is critical to this. And that is when we think about the long term, as opposed to just, as we were talking about, facilitating expertise right at the beginning to negotiate a deal. But we have to remember that there are different aspects of the contract making in mining. It's not just the particular, let's say, MDA or negotiation of a license. There are all sorts of subsets of agreements. There can be community development agreements. There could be local supply agreements. There are just a number of other documentation that support, the larger investment. So ensuring that you have the skill sets locally to monitor the compliance of those contracts over time is critical. And when we think about local, one of the concepts that has been shaping up after the African Mining Vision was established was also taking a regional approach to what we mean by local. So there's nuancing the notion of local, such that if, let's say, a particular skill set is not available in Malawi, you don't need to, go to, Norway to get it. Is it in South Africa? Is there somewhere else that is close by continentally that can provide those skill sets as well? And of course, if there's a shortage of those skill sets, then you then move on to more global sourcing. But that notion of developing skill set that is close by that can support governments, and in doing that, ensuring the shared prosperity, it's more consistent in terms of implementation, I think is critical. I think I will, maybe Rebecca has something else to add in terms of that question, but I do think there's going to be, a balancing as always. But I think building out that local skill set, that local capacity is crucial to long-term shared prosperity for the sector.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, actually. I think we really need kind of committed and engaged government people who really understand what has been negotiated and can take that forward long term, and also understand all the other issues of what's going on in the country and everything else. I also agree with you that I think capacity building among local consultants is important as well. I think it's really important that local lawyers and local technical and consultants and whoever they are helped and empowered to advise. But I do think from experience, and I'm sure some of you either lived this or have experienced this, is that often the really good government people are really struggling because they're so busy. They've got so much to do because they are good, and they struggle with bandwidth and the ability to focus on a particular deal and run a particular deal. And they also struggle, I think, sometimes with just expertise. Is that they're trying to be good at a lot of things, and they are good at a lot of things, but it's just difficult to spread yourself too thinly. So I think that there is a need to surround good government people with good local advisors, and where necessary, good international advisors as well. But I think you've got to have all of those people in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Before we turn to Kees, from my experience, if experts are coming to the table, it usually also changes the dynamic, and because it depends on how government representatives or private representatives actually deal with the experts. So maybe that's also a case that maybe also these kind of how to deal with experts maybe is a question in itself. But we do have an expert here, Kees, and you also felt provoked by the question from the audience. Kees, the floor is yours.
Yes, because I think generally I think I'm very much in favor that there's local knowledge. So there is an element of building local knowledge and expertise. However, if you look at the kind of expertise we do, and that applies to many other markets as well, they're truly international markets. So having a knowledge transfer or building local expertise is very difficult because there is just not enough repetitive work for people with that kind of expertise. So that's often the reason that experts are flown in, and that's not only a developing country issue, that applies to developed countries as well. So I think there is some level of expertise that is just too specialist actually to really develop in the country unless there is a big local market. But if you look at, for example, our expertise in ports and rail, there are just not enough projects for experts to work on in a country. That is, however, not to say that people so we talked about learning on the job. That was one of the things said before. And I think that a key element of that learning on the job is to learn and to understand the kind of questions to ask, because and that's the kind of expertise that people can actually build during negotiation processes, that they can learn how things work, what kind of questions should be asked actually to experts that can just fill in the gaps and play their role as an expert. But still, as a government, you can build that kind of expertise more of a general nature during these negotiations, and then you can bring in the experts truly as to improve the level of authority. The experts can bring in the outside examples and so on, but they can only do that if they can really work together with people who actually understand also the kind of questions they should ask to the experts.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed to pointing out that actually that also is an expertise, to actually mining the experts and asking the right questions to get out the knowledge of these people, so that then you can make informed decision. And that in itself is actually a expertise and a skill, to ask the right questions, and how, that's what I said, to how to deal with these experts. I'm sure, Chiara, we have more questions, and maybe we have time for one more question before we then go, because I'm afraid we have already to close this session here, unfortunately. But Chiara, one more question.
Yes, I have another one that is actually a bit related to what Kees just explained. One that addresses that topic of local knowledge and knowledge transfer being sustainable. So the question is, how can governments make sure that the knowledge and expertise that is provided by Connex or other initiatives actually stays in the country? As we know, government officials are in place for a certain time period. So how to make sure that knowledge transfer is sustainable and persists in the long term? And maybe one part of the answer, is that we train local consultants, as Rebecca pointed out, but maybe others have different thoughts on that and can explore a bit.
Yeah, thank you. Who wants to react to this question? Yeah, Santiago, please.
Yes, this is, I think, a crucial topic about this, and I absolutely agree with what I heard. Maybe actually, when the country negotiates a good deal or a good contract, probably the most important thing is how to block part of the benefits to invest in the authorities that are the ones responsible for the good practices to surround the mining development in every sense. And I totally agree that many times the country has not enough cases or projects to develop a whole team. In federal countries like Argentina is even worse, because each province is supposedly to try to bring together all that team when only few minings are opening every 2 years or 3 years. So maybe the one possible answer to that is that the part of the benefits taken out of the projects or the mining for the government needs to be exclusively dedicated to a program, and not to rely on very good officials that they're always there but very busy, as Rebecca said, but to a program that is sustainable and that entails the international cooperation, because I do think that Connex brings many times the idea to the good officials that this is something that you will always need. It's always good to have cooperation in specific points. So So maybe the most important outcome of a good deal is to bring that system or program sustainably into the future, and how to bring the experts when you need them, and how to do the right questions, I think.
Yeah, thank you all very much. I'm really afraid we have to come to an end of this interesting panel. I take away that an initiative like Connex actually is needed, not just only now, but maybe something that needs to be there for a long time to support governments, but also companies to make better deals, and actually to gain momentum to reach our goals in a just transformation and green economy. So that is what also I just took from Santiago here at the very end. Thank you all very much for your insights and for your different perspectives. And with having said this, we are turning immediately to our closing session. Thank you very much. And I hope you stay tuned for our closing session. It will be exciting because we will have two voices that actually will close the forum. And I'm really glad that we have two perspectives now and two voices at the end of our high-level forum. It's first we have the Chairman Gray from Liberia. He will share his experience on the cooperation with Connex, and then we will have Christian Lemper, who also has a story with Connex since the very beginning, because he led it a few years ago. So we have two voices from the Global South and from the Global North, and that actually is exactly what we try to do here during the whole forum, that we have these different angles, different perspectives on our subject in order to get a more comprehensive view. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor for our last two speakers. Welcome, Chairman Gray from Liberia. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be joining the forum to make closing remarks. Liberia is a beneficiary country of Connex G7 Secretariat support, and we're very pleased with the level of support that has been provided to our country so far. I'll follow the conversation, and I'm listening to most of the speakers. I think what is critical to articulate is that in these complex negotiations, it's critical for developing countries or countries with capacity challenges to have support. The kind of support that Connex provide brings confidence to the negotiation process, especially mining negotiations, which are very complex, in my view. In the instant case of the support that we've received, we quickly went from around discussing an extension to a mining project, and we dovetailed into an infrastructure piece. And so we needed to have legal, technical, and financial support, which we've been able to receive from Connex, and that has brought confidence to our negotiation process. The support we've received has given us, has brought enlightenment to our negotiating team, but also there's been a lot of knowledge transfer. We're talking about large projects here. We were looking at an extension for an $800 million extension for one mining company. And then we started to look at the infrastructure piece that saw additional mining outfits coming on board. And so it was necessary to have the right kind of support, from Connex in order for us to be able to negotiate these discussions and to have a win-win situation both for the companies and for the government. So we are happy. It's a going concern. The support is ongoing, both with the infrastructure expert, the legal support provided by ISLP in collaboration with Connex. Is an ongoing concern, and this support has been ongoing for the last few years. The last round of support has been since 2019. So we're happy, and not to bore you too much, we'd like to thank the organizers of this forum. We'd like to thank all the colleagues that we've been working with from Connex, from Julian to Sunmin to Richard, Dion, and Bridget. We thank you all for the support, and we wish you all a very, very successful close of this event. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Gray, for your warm words and also for highlighting the importance of Connex for the projects it's done. Without further ado, I want to give the floor now to Christian Lemper. He is head of section for governments and human rights at the GIZ. And as I said before, he has a story with Connex since he led it a few years ago. Christian, the floor is yours for the closing remarks. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay. I just heard that we do have, that he is still on his way, but I still have Chairman Gray here with me. So Chairman Gray, if you could elaborate a little bit more on the importance that Connex actually had, and maybe what exactly was it that Connex did to make your projects more successful?
So thank you, Regis. So back in 2019, we made our second round of requests to Connex because we had a mining company that we were looking to renegotiate a contract with. And this is a very complex contract. It has a mining component, it has an infrastructure component. Under infrastructure component, there was both real important conversations that we were trying to address. Specifically, moving from a single user infrastructure user to a multi, or what you might call share use infrastructure, both really important. So it was important for the country to get the right type of expertise or transaction advisors in place to renegotiate a particular deal. And so we made that request to Connex, and Connex obliged. Within less than a month, we got feedback relative to getting support. That is another critical issue, because Connex support is very, very quick and robust. And that was something we needed. And it was very important for us to also, as a new government, to show to to give confidence to the investment community that we had the right team in place to renegotiate or to negotiate new contracts. So Connex support was timely. Connex came on board first with a strategic advisor to review the process. Thereafter, they brought in a mining expert through one of the transaction advisors, Puma Resources. They also brought in an infrastructure company. I was happy to see somebody from the Rebel Group online, Kees, Hörchner, providing the kind of technical expertise that's required to advise a government in terms of making the right decisions. These are very compound renegotiation processes. And because of capacity limitations from a country that has come from war, where there has been, capacity gaps in the public sector, it was important to get the kind of support that we got from Connex.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I heard from you is that one really winning point is that Connex is able to provide its services so quickly. My last question was, because we're just talking about, is that, again, the experts are flying in, and they're working together with you. How did you experience the relationship with the external experts? Was this on on equal footprint, or how did you realize some kind of power issues there?
I mean,
Yeah.
it has been a wonderful experience, not just for myself, but for the rest of our team. You know, meeting, interacting, learning from experts, from the experts that were procured for this particular project. It has been a wonderful experience, especially when it comes to knowledge transfer. The type of work we're involved with requires a certain type of skill set that with these kind of complex conversations is very difficult to come by. So getting the right type of experts to interact with, being engaged, over time they become like family to you. You start to call them on their first names, and you try to keep in touch by WhatsApp and regular calls, because it becomes so engaging and rewarding for not just for for high level government officials, but also for our team that support the negotiations.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm not surprised that you're saying this, that working so closely together makes you feel like a family and you stay in contact. And maybe that's also a success factor, that you do have people coming from abroad who are actually able to engage in this kind of way. So that is for them not only a business, but also something that they're really interested in doing. Chairman Gray, thank you so much for joining us now and giving your thoughts here at the closing of a high-level forum. And I now have the honor to introduce to you Christian Lemper. He is, again, the head of section for governments and human rights at GIZ. And as I said before, he led Connex a few years ago, but then for reasons I cannot actually follow up, he left it, and now he's in a different section. But now you're back, and I'm glad we have you here for your closing words for our high-level forum. Christian, welcome at the forum.
Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction, and also thank you very much, Chairman Gray, for these very encouraging words of your experiences with the Connex. And I left Connex to give it to much more able hands, and rightly so. Since 4 years ago, the initiative has made a tremendous development, and I'm very honored to speak today. And as an early witness of the beginnings of the Connex support unit, I'm thrilled and honored to close these insightful and meaningful 2 days of dialogue. I'm extremely pleased that we had participants from so many backgrounds and disciplines join us for the high-level forum on investment contracts. Thank you very much to all of you who brought the forum to life. The high-level forum's goal has been to show how relevant negotiation support and investment contracts is to partner countries. This is particularly true for mining, infrastructure, and renewable energy. As several panelists highlighted, a well-negotiated contract today can lead to a better tomorrow. It can contribute to the sustainable development of a country, attracting investment, mobilizing domestic resources, and certainly providing essential services for the citizens such as education, health, and electricity. An inequality of arms at the negotiation table brings massive negative financial and developmental impacts for partner countries. That is why we hope that the value of negotiation support continues to be appreciated and leads to concrete political and financial commitments. It's encouraging in that regard that the G7 raised Connex in the Development Ministers' communique in May. The panel discussions highlighted the role of investment contracts in 2 major areas: sustainable infrastructure development and climate action. Over the past 2 days, we have heard insights from government officials about the difficulty in negotiating with international investors on an equal footing. We listened to top experts regarding how contracts can be transformative and change the development path of a whole country. Although government and expert positions do not always see eye to eye, both agree that business as usual is not good enough. It is important to consider climate change aspects in contracts, how nationally determined contributions are incorporated, and how we all, yes, we all, can play a part in safeguarding the availability of critical minerals to help facilitate a just transition. In infrastructure, tens of millions of citizens require access to goods and services. Infrastructure contracts need to include the procurement of less carbon-intensive materials, ensure that infrastructure is resilient to changing weather patterns, and that it is flexibly built to adapt its use over the lifetime. I would like to re-emphasize the point of Parliamentary State Secretary Dr. Kofler yesterday and several others as well, the value of partnerships. Connex has worked closely with partner organizations in several countries. I would like to highlight the Senior Lawyers Project, who are also present here and who I personally had the pleasure to work with. From our side, the financial investment in Connex has proven to be of excellent value for the German government and its partner countries. The partner countries need international donors who see Connex value and financially contribute to it. It has enabled better deals and helped to unlock billions of dollars of investment. In short, negotiation support is a wise investment in an innovative and effective tool of development cooperation, which pays over the years. In the case of Panama's, that is 40 years. Let me conclude, and I cannot close without mentioning the people who really shaped this initiative. I would like to thank the Connex board member, Dr. Sören Deng, and Mr. Günther Noke, Connex Advisory Committee, and the entire Connex support unit for their work, for organizing the high-level forum, but also for their continued dedication to help partner countries achieve better deals. I hope that participants got a better understanding of the enormous challenge that many governments face in negotiating their investment contracts. And to those partner countries already facing them, I'd like to offer the support of Connex in getting better deals for this generation and the next. I invite you all to join Connex on our next steps of this journey. Again, many thanks for being here. Stay safe and stay healthy. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Christian, for your closing remarks. And you already started the hugging and kissing, and I just joined it. And I also like to thank all of you for participating in the Connex High Level Forum. I like to thank all our speakers who contributed with their wisdom and shared their knowledge and experience with us. I thank all of you for your attention and interest, for your questions and comments. And now it's also time, and it is my pleasure to thank all the team that made this Connex Forum possible. The Connex team, who had the idea for it, took the initiative, identified and invited the speakers, did all the logistic and administration and worked mainly in the background. Brigitte, Richard, Dennis, Heike, Midi, Sun Min, and Diara. I also like to thank our translator, who did a fantastic job yesterday and today. And then the conference team under the supervision of Ute, who did all the logistic communication and managed simply everything so that everybody always knew what he or she has to do. And Ute herself never got nervous. Last but not least, our production team, all the technicians, sound and video experts, again, under the guidance of Ute with the Berlin company Sendewerk, who made the streaming with state-of-the-art technology. The next step of Connex are exciting. Please stay in touch by visiting Connex website and through Connex publications. The Connex team will evaluate and reflect on the learnings from this forum and use it to create an even more effective and partner-oriented negotiation support service. This, we hope, will play a small role to achieve sustainable infrastructure and to address climate change. It will also contribute to the restoration of our environment and to fight poverty. Thank you very much. Be safe and stay healthy.